The police siren hit the gas station before I even realized my hands were shaking. Candace Rowe was already outside, screaming into her phone, pointing at me like I'd committed a felony. "He's refusing essential service to HOA residents," she shouted. "I want him arrested right now." Cars stopped pumping. Phones came out. People filmed. All of this over a full tank of gas she refused to pay for. When the patrol car rolled in, Candace smiled like she'd won. She marched up to the officer and said, "That man is abusing his position." The officer looked at her calmly. Then he asked one simple question. "Did you pay?" Candace froze. "That's irrelevant," she snapped. The officer sighed, and that's when Candace turned back to me, eyes cold, and whispered through her teeth, "Enjoy today. Tomorrow the HOA handles you." I didn't know it yet, but that threat was about to cost her everything. Candace Rowe didn't walk into Summit Junction Mart and Fuel. She took command of it. She slammed her leather purse onto the counter like a gavel and said, "Pump 6, fill it up, charge it to the HOA." Not a request, an order. I told her calmly that we don't have an HOA account, and she'd need to pay first, same rule as everyone else. The smile slid off her face like it had never belonged there. She straightened chin up, eyes hard. "Do you know who I am?" she asked. I did. Everyone did. Candace Rowe, president of Summit Ridge Estates, the kind of HOA that fined people for visible hoses and measured grass with rulers. She didn't need to raise her voice often. Her authority usually did the work for her. "I don't care," I said. "Payment comes first." That was the moment she decided I was the enemy. She pulled out her phone and announced loudly that she was being targeted, that this business was hostile to the HOA community. Within seconds, she was narrating her own version of events, turning a simple refusal into an alleged crime. Candace's motive was simple and only needed to be stated once she expected obedience. From residents, from businesses, from anyone unlucky enough to be in her orbit. When I didn't bend, she didn't negotiate. She escalated, because to Candace rules weren't limits, they were weapons. The next morning, the first thing I saw wasn't the pumps or the price sign. It was a sheet of poster board taped crookedly to the front door. Boycott, Summit Junction Fuel. Justice for HOA residents. Red marker. Heavy strokes. Pressed hard enough to tear the paper. I stood there for a second, keys still in my hand, letting the reality sink in. Candace hadn't cooled off. She'd multiplied. Inside, the store smelled like burnt coffee and anxiety. Tessa was already behind the counter, 3 cups deep. Eyes sharp like she'd been on watch all night. "Before you ask," she said, "no, that wasn't here when I opened. Someone put it up at dawn. Very dramatic. Lots of tape. By 8:30, the first wave arrived. Not customers, spectators. A woman in yoga pants pretended to study windshield fluid while filming me through a shelf. A guy bought nothing, just leaned on the counter and asked if I believed in economic oppression. Phones were everywhere. Every move I made felt like it could be clipped, edited, weaponized. Across the street, Candace stood at the entrance to Summit Ridge Estates, with 3 supporters and a ring light, a megaphone, matching signs, a live stream already running. I watched her point toward the store like she was warning people about a crime scene. This wasn't a complaint anymore. It was a campaign. At 9:12 a.m., 2 men in cheap suits walked in like they owned the place. They wore badges on lanyards that looked freshly printed. The taller one puffed out his chest. "Community Consumer Oversight," he announced. "We're here regarding multiple allegations of discriminatory service practices." Tessa didn't even look up. "No, you're not." They ignored her and turned to me, listing charges that sounded official enough to scare someone who didn't know better: hostility toward HOA members, unfair access, economic bias. I folded my arms. "Who sent you?" They hesitated. That half second told me everything. Tessa leaned forward, deadly serious. "Company policy says all formal complaints require a compliance demonstration." What the shorter guy asked. "A duck dance," she said, quacking included. Silence. She flapped her arms, loud, proud, full commitment. Mrs. Calder at the lottery counter laughed so hard she dropped her ticket. The 2 men turned red, muttered about checking with a supervisor, and bolted. I should have felt relief. I didn't, because 10 minutes later, the actual HOA showed up. 3 board members in matching polos stood outside, taking photos, pumps, trash cans, cameras, me. Like documentation was power. One finally came in, shoved a clipboard at me. "Community standards violation. Sign here." I pushed it back. "This isn't HOA property." He smiled thinly. "It will be escalated." That word again, escalated. At 11, my district manager pulled in. Bradley Knox didn't ease into problems. He detonated. He slapped a stack of printed emails onto the counter. Do you have any idea what kind of attention this station is getting? Insurance calls? Chamber of Commerce calls? HOA complaints flooding corporate channels. This is trending, he snapped. Trending. I explained everything. The demand for free gas, the 911 call, the protest, the fake inspectors. He didn't care. I need this drama gone, he said. I don't care how. If that means suspending you until it blows over, so be it. Suspended. The word hit harder than anything Candace had done. I'd followed policy, stayed calm, told the truth. And still my job was suddenly collateral damage. Bradley left without waiting for an answer. The door rattled behind him. I sat down on the step behind the counter, hands shaking now for real. Not anger, not fear, pressure. Candace didn't want gas. She wanted submission. A public example. Proof that when the HOA pointed, the world moved. Tessa sat beside me, calm as ever. Okay, she said. No more defense. I looked at her. What are you thinking? She tapped her phone. I'm thinking if Candace wants an audience, we give her one she can't control. I swallowed. With what? She smiled. With people who don't answer to HOA presidents. Outside, Candace's megaphone screeched again. And for the first time, I stopped wondering how to make it end, and started wondering how far she'd gone already. By early afternoon, the parking lot no longer felt like a business. It felt like a stage. Cars slowed just to stare. Someone dragged out lawn chairs. A teenager live-streamed while eating chips. Like this was a weekend show. Candace stood dead center near the curb, megaphone in hand voice cracking through cheap plastic. This business is hostile to our community, she declared. They deny essential services and target HOA residents. Pay for your gas, someone yelled from across the street. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Candace shot a look sharp enough to cut glass and kept going. That's when the patrol cruiser rolled in. Sheriff Nolan Pierce stepped out, slow, sunglasses on, posture relaxed in the way only someone used to nonsense could manage. He scanned the signs, the crowd, the blocked driveway. He looked tired. All right, he said. What's happening? Candace rushed him, megaphone inches from his chest. Sheriff, thank goodness. This business is discriminating against our HOA. I demand action. Pierce glanced at me through the glass, then back at her. Ma'am, did you pay for the gas? Her mouth tightened. That's not the issue. It's the only issue, he replied. Before she could answer, another vehicle pulled in, clean black official. The crowd went quiet like someone had turned down the volume. The mayor stepped out. Mayor Frank Halverson didn't look angry. That worried me more than if he had. He took in the scene, the signs, the megaphone, the phones. Candace, he said evenly. Why is half the road blocked? She launched into a breathless recap. Oppression, harassment, dignity, HOA rights. Big words. Dramatic pauses. He listened, then asked one question. Did you pay for the service you demanded? Silence. That's irrelevant, Candace snapped. The mayor nodded once. It's extremely relevant. He turned slightly so the cameras could hear him clearly. This business is not under HOA jurisdiction. You cannot demand free services. You cannot block access. And you cannot weaponize your position for personal disputes. Murmurs spread. Phones lowered. A few signs dipped. Candace stared at him like he'd betrayed her personally. This is a misunderstanding, she said quickly. You've been misinformed. I don't think I have, the mayor replied. That's when I realized this wasn't going her way anymore. Candace wasn't done. She never was. She raised the megaphone again. Everyone, don't be distracted. We are being silenced. A man in a folding chair yelled, Go home. More laughter. Not cruel. Not yet. But real. The mayor turned to Sheriff Pierce. We need to clear this area. Pierce nodded. You heard him. You're obstructing a business and traffic. Candace stepped in front of him. You can't do this. I represent the community. A soft voice spoke up behind her. That's not true. Everyone turned. It was Martin Hale, one of the HOA board members. Quiet guy. Retired. The kind who'd been paying fines instead of fighting them for years. You never called a vote, he said, louder now. You didn't get board approval for this. Candace whipped around. Martin, stop. You didn't, he continued. You used HOA funds for signs. You called the police without board consent. Another board member nodded. She told us there was a safety emergency. She said there was an explosion, someone else added. Sheriff Pierce frowned. There was no explosion. Candace's face drained of color. She tried to laugh it off. I was making a point, a false one, the mayor said. That caused panic. The crowd started talking over each other now. Stories poured out, fines for nonsense, threats, letters, warnings. Candace backed up a step, then another. She tried to climb onto a bench for height for authority, but it only made her look smaller. "Listen to me," she shouted. No one did. Sheriff Pierce pulled out his notepad. "Candace Rowe, I'm issuing you a citation for misuse of emergency services and obstruction." Gasps. Phones shot back up. "You can't," she whispered. "This is retaliation." "No," he said calmly. "This is consequences." Her clipboard slipped from her hands and hit the pavement. That's when Martin cleared his throat again. "I formally call for a vote of no confidence in the HOA president," he said. "Effective immediately. Emergency meeting tonight." The words landed like a hammer. Candace looked around, desperate for support, but signs were lowering, people stepping back, eyes avoiding hers. "You can't do this," she screamed. "I am the HOA." Martin met her eyes. "You were." Candace turned and ran for her SUV tires, screeching as she tore out of the lot, a protest sign peeling off her hood and tumbling into the street. The crowd stood frozen for a beat. Then the mayor turned toward me loud enough for every camera. "For the record," he said, "this business did nothing wrong." I felt it then, the shift. The snap. But before I could breathe, Sheriff Pierce added, "And the board meets tonight." My stomach tightened, because I knew what that meant. What Candace would do next would decide how this ended. The emergency HOA meeting didn't happen in a quiet boardroom. It happened right there in the open, because Candace had already dragged the whole town into it. By sunset, folding chairs filled the sidewalk. Phones were back up. Sheriff Pierce stood off to the side, arms crossed. The mayor stayed close watching. Candace showed up late. She pushed through the crowd like she still owned it, heels clicking, face tight with rage. She grabbed the portable microphone from the HOA table and didn't wait for permission. "This meeting is illegal," she snapped. "I was ambushed. This business manipulated you." Her finger shot toward me. "He provoked this. He humiliated the HOA. And now you're rewarding him," a few people murmured. For half a second I felt the room wobble. Then the mayor stepped forward. "Candace," he said evenly, "this meeting is valid. Sit down." She didn't. That's when Sheriff Pierce took one step closer and said, "Ma'am, this is your last warning." And the room went dead quiet. Martin stood up with a folder in his hands. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "We reviewed the facts," he said. "Not opinions. Facts." He held up a printed transcript. "Here's the 911 call where Candace claimed an emergency that didn't exist." Another page. "Here are receipts showing HOA funds used for protest signs and equipment. No board approval." He looked straight at her. "And here are messages sent to board members, false claims about explosions, safety threats, and criminal behavior." Candace laughed once, sharp and brittle. "That's out of context." Martin didn't argue. He handed the packet to the mayor, then to the sheriff. Phones zoomed in. People whispered. Someone in the back said, "Oh my God, this wasn't gossip anymore. It was paper, ink, proof." Candace opened her mouth to speak, and nothing came out. "I move to remove Candace Rowe as HOA president," Martin said. "Effective immediately." Hands went up. 1, 2, then most of them. Candace shook her head violently. "No. No, you can't. This is a setup. You're all afraid." No one answered. The mayor nodded once. The motion passes. Something broke in her face. Not anger. Panic. Sheriff Pierce stepped forward. "Ma'am, you'll receive notice regarding fines and further review." Candace backed away, eyes darting, breath uneven. "You'll regret this," she whispered. "All of you." No one moved to stop her, as she turned and walked, then ran toward her SUV. The engine roared. Tires screamed. She vanished down the road, leaving silence behind. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then the mayor turned to the crowd and to every phone still recording. "This ends now," he said. "This business followed the law. The abuse stops here." I stood there, heart pounding, realizing something simple and terrifying. The fight was over. But the consequences were just beginning. The parking lot didn't explode into cheers. It softened. People lowered their phones like they'd suddenly remembered they were holding them. Folding chairs scraped back. Conversations turned quiet, unsure, almost embarrassed. A few neighbors approached me, not all at once, not dramatically, just one by one. "I'm sorry," a man said, eyes down. "She fined us for stupid stuff. We should have spoken up sooner." A woman nodded beside him. "Thank you for standing your ground." I didn't know how to respond, so I just nodded back. The tension I'd been carrying for days finally slipped loose from my shoulders. I realized how rigid I'd been standing, like I was braced for another hit that never came. Behind the counter, Tessa exhaled loud enough for me to hear it through the open door. She gave me a small smile, not sarcastic for once, just proud. For the first time since Candace walked in demanding free gas, I felt something close to calm. Not victory, not relief, balance. The mayor stayed until most of the crowd dispersed. Standing near the pumps, he spoke plainly. No speeches, no slogans, just facts. The HOA board will file formal notice tonight, he said. There will be an audit of expenses, communication records, and enforcement actions. He looked around at the remaining board members. From now on, no HOA decision involving fines, public action, or outside entities happens without a recorded vote and third-party review. Heads nodded. Quietly. Seriously. Sheriff Pierce added, any further complaints related to this business come through my office first. No more misuse of emergency services. That sentence mattered more than anything else he could have said. My district manager stepped closer, suddenly very polite. He cleared his throat and said, corporate reviewed the footage. You handled this by the book. He slid an envelope across the counter. There's a bonus inside. And your position is fully protected. No drama. No apology speech. Just confirmation. The system, the one Candace tried to bend, had finally snapped back into place. As the sun dipped behind the ridge, the lot thinned until only a few cars remained. The neon sign hummed softly. The pumps clicked back to life, like nothing extraordinary had happened. That's when a familiar SUV rolled in. Slow, careful, no honking. Candace stepped out alone. No sunglasses, no clipboard, no entourage. She stopped a few feet from the counter, hands tight around a small envelope. Her shoulders looked heavier than I remembered. I won't stay long, she said quietly. Tessa crossed her arms but didn't speak. Candace set the envelope down. That's a signed withdrawal of every complaint I filed. County, corporate, everyone. She swallowed. I've lost my position. The board voted unanimously. I nodded once. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't defend herself. She just said, I let control turn into something ugly. You didn't deserve that. Then she stepped back. For a moment it felt like she might say more, but she didn't. She turned, walked to her SUV, and drove away without drama, without noise. The lot fell quiet again. I looked at the pumps, the same pumps she'd tried to weaponize, and realized what they'd become to me. Not equipment, a boundary. You pay. You follow the rules. No exceptions for titles. Tessa broke the silence. Well, she said softly, that's the end of that. I locked the register, flipped the sign to close ed, and stood there breathing in the cool evening air. Sometimes power collapses loudly. Sometimes it just leaves. And when it does, you don't chase it. You don't celebrate it. You just keep your ground and let peace return on its own.